All right, thank you everyone for showing up. This is Ibrahim. I'm a PhD candidate at York University, not the UK one in Canada, because I always get that. And I'm so pleased to be here with you today to basically present, it's not working. It's not working. To present a part of my doctoral research data with you here today. Okay. So basically, that's what I'm hoping to cover with you today. Basically, when I was putting this together, and I think I was inspired by the theme of peace building, I wanted to maybe show Eric's journey as a process or a journey to find some inner peace through identity work in virtual exchange. So as we all know, there's now more push for decolonial approaches in doing research in applied linguistics. And obviously, virtual exchange researchers have also been advocating for critical approaches in virtual exchange. Tomorrow, for instance, there's a presentation by Dr. 𝙎𝙩𝙪𝙙𝙪 on one of the critical virtual exchanges that you might want to attend. And obviously, this is not just to help us reach more marginalized contexts or learn from different groups around the world, but also it's a way to empower educators and students alike to have their voices heard and communicated through virtual exchange. So as you can see, there's a lot of literature that has been done already on this area, but just to highlight two recent ones from colleagues and friends also, it's been found that virtual exchange definitely supports academic success, especially for, let's say, single mom, female students, financially disadvantaged students, first-generation students of African Americans and Latin American students in North Carolina, for instance. The same for African American and Latina American students in Atlanta, Georgia, where they were introduced to different cultural backgrounds, new ones to them, and it was actually a way to encourage them to at least consider study abroad or traveling outside of their community. But at the same time, I think also as somebody who's been practicing virtual exchange for a few years now, we still need more research that highlights marginalized experiences as much as marginalized contexts. And this is not just to see those marginalized communities as less homogeneous, but it's going to really help us appreciate the diversity of marginalized experiences of the students we work with. And that's why I think case study methodology is really one way to just dig deeper into those experiences and learn more about what's really going on with these students who are trying to resist ideologies and really work so hard to challenge themselves and negotiate who they are through virtual exchange. So I think a lot of us are familiar with the reviewed model of investment that was put together by Darvin and Norton in 2015. And this model really I think is pretty much related to the work we do in virtual exchange. Because if you think of the virtual space as a place that is, there are a lot of students coming from different diverse cultural backgrounds, students who are playing roles more than just the native speaker, language learner. Obviously, the digital literacy empowers them to, earn, let's say, their legitimacy of membership, not just as language learners, but also as valued members of their own communities. So when we talk about ideology, basically we should be talking about ideologies, right, that are invisible in virtual exchange or the virtual space. And as been highly recommended, we should actually be naming those ideologies. So just to highlight the case I would like to present today, and just to have that in mind when I present even more on it later on. So for Eric, for instance, who is a Hui Chinese student in Canada, those ideologies were trying to really understand this position of, I do belong to a global Muslim community as a Muslim. At the same time, I'm Chinese. So this idea of that belonging to Islam as a religion, seeing it as a vacancy of identity, at the same time, kind of trying to earn or have that minority nationality identity that a lot of intellectuals of China are trying to have the Hui people basically validate. So these are two ideologies that you could find himself, facing or, negotiating. Same as capital, and we're all familiar with symbolic capital. We know it's really important for our social status. We also know that it changes over time and space. And I think virtual exchange can definitely grant students this opportunity to realize that symbolic capital changes over time and space, and also have them just be aware of the fact that, as Beauvoir argues, it is in itself a fluid and a dynamic, a concept. So basically, this idea that using technology to earn that was very much important to him, and also observing him doing it. Identity obviously is a multiple. It's changing. It's a lot of different things. So for Eric, for instance, he's presenting himself and negotiating his identity as a Chinese, Muslim, English learner, international student in Canada, and you could see all that kind of coming together in the identity negotiation work that he was doing. So just to give you a very brief context on Hui Muslims of China, there are obviously a minority in China. There's almost 8 million Hui Muslims in China. And basically, just like other minorities, Muslim minorities in particular of China, they've been facing some discrimination against their faith. Basically, again, just to go back to this idea of ideologies, a lot of intellectuals are kind of pushing for Hui Chinese to accept the minority nationality kind of, identity. At the same time, you have the religious leaders are kind of pushing for accepting Islam, so as a religion, as core of your identity. But they also know that this is really not easy. Among history, these people, existed in China for over 1,000 years. But among history, you could see them really trying to fit in the Han culture. They adopted different practices. So obviously now they speak Mandarin, so learning the local language, being part of the local community economy, as long as it's halal or it's not forbidden, right, in Islam. But you still see that there is acculturation practices against them. And this is pretty much obvious of not making mosque the centrality of the Hui community, which is very much, pretty much basic and natural for Muslim communities. And this really brings us to the complexity of their identity. As you could imagine, part of them, if you look at the, Hui communities themselves, it cannot really relate, for instance, to the Turkish-speaking, Persian-speaking, Arabic-speaking minorities in their community. Obviously, the socio-political aspirations are different. The culture itself is different. The heritage is different. At the same time, even for those who traveled in the Middle East, and they try to kind of, address like Arabs, they still cannot relate to cultures where Islam is just a natural composure of who they are. So they're trying to, they are Chinese in language and the way they look and the way they basically function. They're Muslim, but at the same time, especially the new generation, because of those, acculturation policies, they don't know much about Islam. They don't know much about the mosque. The mosque is not the center of, their community anymore. It's socialism. It's the, main culture of the Han Chinese. So you can see the complexity of that identity and the work that Eric, was really trying to do throughout the virtual exchange. So meet Eric. Eric was basically one of the participants in my doctoral study. I connected students, ESL University students in Canada with ESL University students in Jordan. That's where I come from originally. And he, at the time when we collected data, he was 24 years old. He's Hui, Chinese. And he lived in Canada since high school. So basically, he spent a lot of time in Canada studying English, and he was basically graduating by the time we were conducting the virtual exchange. And he basically, because he's not as rich as other Chinese students, that's also a component, right? Economic struggles that they face back home. He also worked as a chef in a Japanese restaurant for a long time. Just to give you a little bit of context of the research, the bigger research, this was a virtual exchange that connected students for 7 weeks. they did some collaboration, interaction. The small group Eric was part of had him, another Han Chinese student in Canada, and two students in Jordan. One was Palestinian, so Palestinian nationality doing studies in Jordan, and the other one is Palestinian Jordanian. So I just wanted to highlight all of these kind of things I have in here are basically, quotes from what he shared with me, or he shared in the virtual exchange. So I just would like to highlight some of the strategies, or some of the, just to give you a glimpse of the identity work that he was doing in the virtual exchange. So at the beginning, students were expected to produce this autoethnography kind of personal learning journey video. And the instructors did not necessarily highlight culture, like, oh, just talk about your English language learning journey. So it's very interesting to see that at the beginning of the virtual exchange, producing that video, knowing that he's going to meet both parties for the first time, he was basically highlighting, his heritage as a Muslim Chinese. So he was talking about his faith, how it's practiced back in China, the fact that he's Chinese, which, means that he does this and this and that. It's interesting also to see that he basically talked a little bit about him being Muslim. I think because, he's meeting also Jordanians for the first time, and he's excited to be meeting people from another country. But you could also see that it was really powerful to him. And I think this first quote kind of summarizes his experience of the virtual exchange. Entering the virtual exchange, he really had a goal. He was like, I'm here to also tell my fellow Chinese students that they should not fear me. I'm just, a Chinese fellow. I'm here to, deliver a message, to introduce them to my Muslim Chinese culture. So as much as he really wanted his Jordanian partners to learn about him, he also wanted his Chinese students to break that ice. And basically, so for me, it was really interesting because this guy that was with him in the virtual exchange, they were exactly in the same course. So for him to take the virtual exchange as an opportunity to break this ice versus, in person is a really interesting exposure. Later on in the virtual exchange, you see him getting so excited about meeting the Jordanian students. He started asking them to teach him some Arabic. He started teaching himself some Arabic, and you could see that, in the meetings and the interviews they had with one another, he would, say, shukran, afwan, marhaba, salam alaikum. Oh, how do you say that? Oh, sabah al-khair. Okay, good morning. And he would basically, get the translator all the time as a way to just get closer to his Jordanian partners. When it came to the time where they were basically trying to put together an intercultural scenario, he was excited about, like, oh, let's do something on Ramadan. Let's experience Ramadan, in Jordan. And this is when things started to get a little bit more complex to him, because in that meeting, I wish I could play you the clips, but unfortunately, some of my participants did not allow me to share them publicly. But in that meeting, he basically introduced this idea to his Jordanian partners, not maybe realizing that the Han student is becoming more silent now. He's not really taking part in the conversation, especially that he suggested, listen, how about we play the role where me and Michael go to Jordan. I'm going to play the Muslim Chinese. He's going to play the non-Muslim Chinese. He's going to make some mistakes. And we're going to try to together teach him about Islam and Ramadan practices. So this is when he started to kind of lean more towards, like his Muslim identity, trying to just get connected with the Jordanian partners. And that's why later on, and I remember when I had the interview with him, that was one of the activities they had to do, which is posting on Padlet choosing some, topics on cultural stereotypes. And he chose to go back to basically talking about his experience as a Chinese student. And I remember in the interview, the second interview, I asked him, I was like, Eric, you told me at the beginning that you're really using this virtual exchange as a tool to, break stereotypes also among Chinese students and Jordanian students about being a Chinese Muslim. Can you please tell me why you, talked about something maybe a little bit different? And he was like, well, I also want them to know that I'm still Chinese. Look at me. I look Asian. I'm Chinese. I still face the same struggles, the same stereotypes that my Han Chinese fellows face. So you could see that he's now kind of, you know, in between trying to, yes, relate to his Muslim friends or partners, at the same time trying to show his Han, you know, fellows that I'm still Chinese. I'm Chinese too. So I face the same stereotypes that you're basically facing on a daily basis in Canada. You could also see you know, this type of going back and forth when he was basically posting to his partners, you know, what are some of the things that you might experience as culture shock when you come to China? And one of the topics he talked about, obviously, is censorship. Like, you're gonna experience censorship. And you could see, I think, I don't know if the, yeah, so when one of his partners asked him to elaborate on that, he said that, you know, just Google it. I can't say much more about it. He told me later on in the interview that they basically talked more about it in the Instagram group that they had offsite. But he was also trying, again, to be careful about what to share, what not to share, and just be mindful of those different, you know, systematic kind of, you know, powers that he was going through. I'm gonna, you know, kind of like just wrap this up by highlighting a few things. And obviously, you know, investment in search of identity is an ongoing process. It gave him this opportunity to explore, I think, and break that fear, as well as Darvin and Norton say, sometimes identity work allows us to explore whom we would like to be and whom we fear to be. So just seeing how he was going back and forth in between those identities, I think really reminded me of that. And obviously, you know, if you think of the work that he did even outside the virtual exchange, which unfortunately was not recorded, but he went, you know, he was really much invested. He created that Instagram group. He was sharing a lot about being Muslim in China. He talked about being Muslim in China with his partners, learned a little, you know, a lot about what's really happening in Jordan and Palestine, for instance. So you could say that obviously it was pretty much a motivation for him to continue, and it was really a platform to just be that active person in virtual exchange. And I think also, while putting this together, I couldn't help but think of an Islamic teaching. It's a Quranic teaching, basically, that it's called 𝙎𝙩𝙪𝙙𝙪. And in English, it translates to beautiful patience. Now, literally, 𝙎𝙩𝙪𝙙𝙪 means that you should, again, you know, from a religious point of view, you accept the degree that God gives you. You accept the hardship, despite knowing that this includes fear and hardship and challenges and, you know, agony. You continue to worship him to the best you can. So realizing that, you know, we're also on this earth going through a lot. It kind of spoke to me that trusting the process might be 𝙎𝙪𝙪, and it involves 𝙎𝙪𝙪, meaning that, you know, you accept being part of a certain ideology or certain ideologies. You work so hard to figure that out. There's fear, there's agony. It's not easy work. It's very complex work. And you might die not knowing exactly, you know, what it is. But I like to maybe think that, you know, that trusting the process or through beautiful patience, it's really through that you find inner peace. It's not necessarily the end that you're reaching, because maybe, again, you die really asking those questions, but it's trusting the process and just going through that process that gives you a little bit of inner peace with practice. Thank you.